The house loomed in the fog like a shadowed sentinel, watching silently as four friends stepped through its crumbling doorway. Elena, Jamie, Mira, and Chris gathered on the dusty floor of the once grand parlor, the only light coming from a single flickering candle. Their breath hung in the air, visible against the cold that seemed to seep up from the house itself. They were here for a dare, a test of courage, but none of them knew the true cost of their curiosity. The Ouija board sat before them, weathered and stained, its faded letters barely visible in the dim light. Elena smirked, her skepticism masking her unease. "If there's anyone here, speak now, or forever hold your peace," she said. The planchette under their fingertips began to tremble. Mira's lips parted in a silent gasp as the smooth piece of wood moved, hesitantly at first, then faster. "Hello. All right, who's messing with us?" Chris said. "No one." "It's responding," says Jamie. "What's your name?" asked Mira. The board answered, in a repeating figure 8, then it spelled Z-O-Z-O. The group exchanged uneasy glances. The air grew colder and the candle's flame sputtered as if it were struggling to survive. Elena's smirk faded, her confidence eroded by the uncanny knowledge the board seemed to have. It knew Jamie's childhood fears, Mira's hidden secrets, and the name of Elena's long-dead grandmother. "What happens if we stop playing?" Chris said in a frightened voice. The planchette moved violently, spelling out a chilling response. D-I-E. The candle extinguished, plunging them into darkness. Mira screamed, and Elena scrambled to turn on her phone flashlight. The beam of light illuminated something new. Faint claw marks etched into the floorboards around their circle, marks that hadn't been there moments before. Elena nodded, but as they attempted to lift their hands from the planchette, they found themselves unable to move. Mira clutched the charm around her neck for comfort, but it shattered in her hand, slicing her palm. Blood dripped onto the board, soaking into the wood like a thirsty sponge. Then came the figure. It stood in the doorway, tall and gaunt, its limbs unnaturally long. The dim light revealed glowing eyes, two faint embers burning in the void where its face should have been. Chris stumbled backward, his bravado gone. It's a trick! Someone's messing with us," Chris said, but deep down they all knew better. The figure took a step forward, its movements jerky and unnatural. The screech of its claws against the floorboards filled the room, piercing and unrelenting. Jamie yelled, kicking the Ouija board away. The planchette skittered across the floor, but the figure didn't stop. Instead, it seemed to grow stronger, its shape twisting and expanding, becoming more monstrous with each second. Suddenly, the room blurred, and they were back in the circle, as if no time had passed. But the claw marks remained. "It's playing with us," Mira yelled. "We need to get out." They scrambled to the door, but it wouldn't budge. The walls began to close in, the room shrinking as though the house itself sought to consume them. "The board! Smash it!" Jamie commanded. He grabbed the board and slammed it against the ground. It splintered, but instead of stopping the nightmare, it unleashed it. The figure was no longer confined to the shadows. It filled the room, a writhing mass of darkness and limbs. Its voice was a guttural rasp, whispering their names, their fears, their sins. Mira, clutching at the remnants of her charm, began to pray. Soft, desperate words she'd heard from her grandmother as a child. The entity recoiled, its form flickering like a damaged film reel. The prayer created a momentary barrier, giving the group the opening they needed. "Now!" Elena yelled. They lunged for the nearest window. Glass shattered as they leapt into the frigid night air, landing in a heap on the wet grass outside. When they turned back, the house was gone. In its place was an empty plot of land, silent and untouched, as if it had never existed. Weeks passed, but the horror lingered. Elena awoke one night to find her grandmother's locket, lost years ago, sitting on her bedside table. Chris heard faint whispers whenever he was alone. Mira avoided mirrors, Her reflection seemed to delay a fraction of a second, as if something else were watching. And Jamie? He stopped visiting the library, unable to face the history section where the house's story first called to him. The veil had been lifted, and though they had survived, they had brought something back. Something that would always be with them. Something that would never let them go. Months went by, but the scary feeling never really went away. Each of them, still spooked in their own way, felt something pulling them back to the place that changed their lives forever. One evening, as the sun went down, they found themselves together again at the edge of the empty field. The house was gone, but the whispers, the shadows, the creepy feeling, they were all back. "We have to stop this," Jamie said, sounding brave but looking scared. They all nodded. Elena held tight to her grandma's locket like it would keep her safe. Chris held a notebook filled with messy notes and drawings of the house. Mira held a mirror, ready to face whatever was hiding there. The air got heavy, and it felt colder as they stepped onto the field. Suddenly, the ground shook and the house started to appear, bit by bit right in front of them. The front door creaked open, like it wanted them to come in. Inside, the house looked just like they remembered, but it felt worse, more suffocating. They moved together, like something was guiding them. The Ouija board was on the table, waiting. "We need to ask it why," Mira whispered, her voice shaky. They put their hands on the little pointer thing, and it started moving on its own. "Why?" they spelled out loud. The board answered right away, "Because you belong to us." The room got freezing, and shadows started to twist on the walls. They could hear quiet laughter coming from deep inside the house. Each shadow seemed to come alive, reaching for them. "We have to destroy it!" Chris yelled over the noise. He grabbed the Ouija board and smashed it on the floor. The house shook hard, and the shadows screamed together. A bright light flashed, and they were suddenly outside again. The house was gone again. The field was quiet and empty, but this time it felt different, like it was really over. The whispers stopped, the shadows disappeared, and the locket on Elena's neck felt warm. They had faced the spooky house and lived. As they walked away, they knew they were finally free. But deep down, they knew that some things, once you've seen them, you can never really forget. Just when they thought it was all over, a freezing wind swept across the field, and they heard a spooky whisper, "It's not finished." The sky went dark, and a thick fog rolled in. The friends looked at each other, their hearts pounding with fear again. "We've got to finish this once and for all," Jamie said, sounding determined. They all nodded, knowing there was no going back. Suddenly, the ground beneath them opened up, swallowing them into a dark, shadowy world. They landed in a dimly lit room with flickering candles everywhere. In the middle stood a tall, scary figure hidden in a dark cloak. Its eyes glowed red, and it felt pure evil. "You can't escape me," the creature hissed. "You're mine!" Elena stepped forward, holding her grandma's locket tight. "We don't belong to anyone," she said bravely. "We've faced our fears. We're stronger than you think." The locket started to glow, giving off a warm, golden light that pushed the shadows away. The creature backed off, hissing angrily. Chris opened his notebook to a page with a strange symbol. "This is the key," he said. "It's a spell to banish it." He started chanting the words from the book, and the candle flames grew brighter with every word. Mira held up the mirror, reflecting the light from the locket onto the creature. It screamed, its body flickering and fading away. The room shook like crazy, but the friends stood their ground. "Keep going!" Jamie yelled, hope in his voice. The creature started to disappear, the shadows retreating. With one last, ear-splitting scream, the creature exploded into a flash of light, and the room vanished around them. They were back in the empty field, the sky clear and the sun coming up. Everything was still and peaceful. The nightmare was finally over. They looked at each other, tears of relief running down their faces. "We did it," Eleanor whispered, her locket now cold against her skin. "It's really over." They walked away from the field, feeling lighter with every step. They knew they had faced something truly terrifying and won. And even though they would never forget the haunted house, they knew they were strong enough to face anything. Together they had beaten the darkness. Together they were free.